So she would accept it.
Edie is here. Edie is here. No pressure. She's
It's 5 o'clock and it is Monday, March the 2nd, so let's begin this meeting of the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee. Today we acknowledge this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. We will have the adoption of the agenda. Could we have a mover and a seconder on adopting the agenda? Mayor Saunderson. Business arising. Oh, is there any discussion regarding the agenda? We need a seconder for that, of course we do. Councillor Comey, Vice Chair Comey. Can we have a vote on that, please? That is carried. Moving on to number 3, business arising from the previous meeting. Any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, moving on to item number 4, declarations of pecuniary interest. Any declarations to be made by any of the members of this committee? Moving on, having seen none, on to number 5, deputations. I believe we have no deputations registered for this evening, so we'll move on to number 6. Reports and minutes of other committees and boards. And the motion is that the following minutes hereby be received and recommendations herein be approved. And that is item 6.1, the Accessibility Advisory Committee from October the 2nd, the Downtown Business Improvement Association Board of Management minutes from January the 7th and January the 9th, the Museum Advisory Committee minutes from January 16th, and the Trails Advisory Committee minutes from January the 9th. May I have a mover and seconder to receive those reports? Councillor Berman and Councillor Comey. Any discussion regarding those reports? Anything that needs to be commented on or direction? Councillor Comey.
I just want to offer a quick comment, if I could, Madam Chair, with respect to the Trails Advisory minutes of January 9th. Item 8.2 in the minutes, it just is a brief mention of the idea of installing small pollinator gardens along the trails. And I just want to give a big thank you to Director Culver and his staff, because I know they've been very receptive to that idea. And I know we like puns, so I'll say it's got some wings, I understand. So I'm hearing very good things about it. So I just wanted to call attention to that.
You're hearing some buzz?
Yeah, you can say that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Comey. So will we accept those? We had a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Thank you. And moving along to the next item. 7, staff reports. Item 7.1, establishing an active transportation advisory committee. I will turn to Director Culver to have a conversation with us regarding the staff report, number C 2020-03.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report was actually prepared by the Clerk's Department because it has to do with the formation and the solution of a committee. However, I can state that the idea was born out of the cycling plan that was presented to Council, with the idea being that the Trails Committee, even by virtue of the discussions that they currently have at their table, are involved in our active transportation framework and plan and on-road and off-road conveyances. So it's appropriate, I think, at this time to evolve the committee to an active transportation committee. I think that's all I can say about that, unless you need anything else.
Would Clerk Almas like to comment as well on this particular piece?
Certainly, through the chair to the members of the committee and the public. So this advisory committee provides recommendations to our corporate and community services standing committee on the development of policies and programs in the area of active transportation and active transportation networks in accordance with approved corporate strategic objectives. So once we set up a new committee or board, is required to have an establishing bylaw. So this bylaw sets the frameworks in which the committee will be working under.
Thank you. Public comment on staff report C 2020-03. Come on down. In the committee structure, do we have the people who speak sign something?
Yes, I believe.
You have to sign in after.
Oh, okay, I can do that. First of all, I'm Murray Doles. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Trails Committee. I'd like to start off, if I could, by asking or answering a question, which is a little unusual since nobody asked me one yet. But there was one question that was in the Collingwood Today article on this particular staff report. And the question was very simply, what does the Trails Committee think about this? So I have answered that particular question to the individual, but I thought it might be a good idea as well just to do the same thing here in a more public forum so that everybody understands sort of where the Trails Committee's been coming from on this thing. I'll start off by saying, we've been involved in this thing from the get-go. And in fact, to some degree, we've actually initiated it. Certainly the first draft of the terms of reference and the areas of responsibility came from the Trails Committee. We've been actively involved in the process all the way through. We've also been actively involved in the cycling plan as far as providing input and everything to the consultant. So I guess when all the dust settles, to sum it up in a nutshell, we're in it for sure, we support it, and see this as being a good news story moving forward. So that's the answer to that one. Make that, I guess, fairly public, because there may be a couple of other people out there in the community who are going, what does the Trails Committee think of this? So hopefully that has answered that. There were a couple of other things that we put into our original submission that I just like to throw out there. One of them was specifically the name of this committee. We perceive this as being an evolution, and I think, I know Councillor, or at least Dean just referred to that as well, an evolution from a Trails Committee into a Trails and Active Transportation Committee. I'm not going to spend too much time going into all of the specific things that the Trails people do that are not just advising items, but we have trail captain volunteers out there, about 35 of them, which we are coordinating. We have map distribution people out there, about a half a dozen of them that we are coordinating, and they keep the map boxes, about 130 of them stocked all the time, and these are stocked across the county, not just in the town of Collingwood. We do initiate interpretive signage on the trails to highlight the town's history and the town's natural history. We are responsible, we do put up most of the trail signs, the off-road trail signs, and we even build boardwalk once in a while. So there are an awful lot of operational issues that the Trails Committee is involved with in addition to just the advisory part of it. And I guess the team felt, I'll use the word, very strongly that the word trails should be kept into this committee, so that it should be called the Trails and Active Transportation Committee, or something along those lines. So that was number one. The other issue that we did put forward at the time, and again, it's sort of part of the fact that there are a number of trails issues that are there that are going to continue to be there and just continue to be trails related issues, is that we really felt that it might be worthwhile to expand the committee slightly by 1 or 2 members. There's a fair number of very specific trail things that need to be done, and they will continue to be done. The mandate obviously is a very clear expansion of the existing mandate. It's no longer trails now, but we're on the roads, we're involved with crossings, or the new committee will be involved with trail crossings. So we felt that that would be appropriate to add 1 or 2 committee members. And the only other last thing, I'll call it a fairly minor thing, just a change, is in the previous bylaw for the Trails Committee, the meeting schedule showed they're generally held once a month, minimum 4 times a year. I noticed that this one just says minimum 4 times a year. I don't know whether there's some plan there to cut down the number of meetings that we have, but certainly from a Trails point of view, we hold these meetings once a month pretty regularly and feel that that is necessary. So that was my comments, and thank you for the time. And if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. Any questions of Mr. Knowles from members of this committee? Mayor Saunderson.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Murray. Well, thank you for all the hard work the Trails have done. I think it goes back to 1994, and I think the stories are legion about George Christie walking into Town Hall with sawdust on his shoulders to tell us about the new routes in town. But thank you for the initiative for your committee and for all that you've done in putting this recommendation for the evolution together. And just want to get a sense, are there 8 members on the current Trails Committee?
7.
7?
Well, plus George Christie is an honorary member. There's 7 voting
Okay.
members.
So when you're talking about expanding it, you're recommending the expansion from 7 to 8 or 9?
1 or 2, yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you, that was my question.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee for Mr. Knowles? I have one. You say that you're concerned about the name of the committee, that you would like to keep the word trails incorporated in it. If it were your choice, would it be the Trails and Active Transportation Committee, or would it be the Active Transportation and Trails Committee?
Well, it's hard to say. I think if there were the other Trails Committee members were in the room, they'd all be going, Trails and Active Transportation Committee. But, realistically, if Trails is in there, I think the important thing is probably for the general public as well. I think everybody in this room probably is fairly familiar with the term active transportation, what it entails. I would suggest that the members of the general public may not be as familiar with that particular terminology. I did notice in the staff report in the first sentence, basically, the purpose is to establish the active transportation in place of the Trails Committee. And I'm sure that there'd be a few people out there in town who would go, wait a minute, active transportation is in, Trails is out. And that may have been what spurred that question that showed up in the Collingwood Today article. So, personal opinion, as long as Trails are there, I'm happy. They might shoot me at the next Trails Committee meeting for saying that. I'm not saying Trails first, but
Well, they might take you for a long walk.
that's true,
There
yes.
we go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Knowles,
Okay.
for your input. Any other questions from members of the public? Excellent. I would like a mover and a seconder, please, on the motion, which is that staff report C 2020-03 be received and that council enact and pass a bylaw to establish an active transportation advisory committee as described herein, and that the Trails Advisory Committee continue with its current membership and mandate until such time as the membership to the Active Transportation Advisory Committee has been established and required bylaws enacted and passed. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Berman. Questions and discussion from members of the committee? Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess our first order, we'll try to tackle some of Mr. Knoll's questions. So through you, please, and I apologize, I'm not sure if this is for the clerk or for Director Culver. Can we then clarify those terms of reference in terms of the meeting schedule? Will the Trails Active Transportation meet monthly, or does this contain a change to their schedule?
I can address, through the chair to Councillor Comey, on 7.6 in the proposed bylaw, it does say shall be held not less than 4 times per year, but it doesn't restrict how often that they can meet. This is consistent right now with, I believe, our Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I'd have to check on the other committees. It wasn't brought to my attention before, but I can look into that and report any difference following the meeting.
Director Culver, did you have something to say in regard to that, or has the clerk answered the question on your behalf?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'm aware that the museum committee has the same language as well.
So I'm guessing this is sort of like a boilerplate thing that one puts together, and then at the chair of the committee, generally at their discretion. Is that where we're going? Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Vice Chair Comey?
And not from me at this moment, thank you.
Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you. This is through you to either Dean or Sarah. In terms of the size of the committee, we understand it's 7 right now, and we've heard the recommendation of co-chair Knowles. In terms of the structure now, we're looking at 7 members. Is there any magic to that number, or is there flexibility there?
Clerk Thomas?
Certainly through the chair to Mayor Saunderson. That question actually did arise last week. So in response to that, there was a governance review that occurred, I believe it was in 2015, when we looked at all of our committees and boards. There were some that were at a lower number, I think 5 members, and there were some that were higher. We evaluated what was working, what wasn't working, looked at some practices within other committee structures around the province, and we decided that 7 was a more efficient number for our members, both for recruitment purposes and for ensuring that the meetings were held effectively and efficiently as well. I indicated that if the committee decided, if the decision was to move with 7, as it's consistent with our other committees, because again, we want it to be prefer it to be an odd number for governance purposes, that could be something, if it could be justified in the future why they need to have more, that could be something that we look at.
So it's just a follow-up then, there's a moving target there that if it needs be because of the demands and the hands-on work done by the committee members, it needs to be expanded, we can do it later. Okay, and then the other comment I would have is that I would certainly like to see the word trails in there, taking co-chair Noel's comments, and also we had some emails from committee members with the same point. So I would be prepared to move that it be the Active Transportation and Trails Committee.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Yes, that would, sorry, an amendment to the motion. An amendment to the motion. Councillor Madigan seconds. Do we have discussion regarding that, Councillor Berman?
If we have discussion, I would have preferred trails first.
I see.
An amendment to the amendment.
I don't know if it
You knew that.
Can't do that.
No?
Anyone else have discussion regarding, so on the table right now, we're discussing to make it the Active Transportation and Trails Committee. We have a mover and we have a seconder. We've had a little bit of discussion. Any other discussion regarding it? Vice Chair Comey.
Yeah, I would offer the same comment as Councillor Berman. I would have preferred trails and active transportation.
Okay then.
first.
So we're going to vote on the amendment to accept the recommendation with the amendment that the name of the committee be Active Transportation and Trails. And we're going to have a vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? And we're back to the main motion. Do we have a new amendment to that motion? Councillor Berman.
So the same amendment, but put in the word trails first.
And so the amendment would be to accept the recommendation and the bylaw herein, and with the amendment being the name to become the Trails and Active Transportation Committee. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Vice Chair Comey. Any discussion regarding this? Then I'll call the question. Those in favor of the amendment, and that has passed unanimously. And then we go back to the motion, the amended motion, and do we have any further discussion regarding it? We do not, so I'll call the question on the amended motion. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Did you get all that? Excellent. Trails and active transportation. Moving on to item number 7.3, PRC 2020-03, Public Art Mural Commission, 28 Huron Street. Do we have a departmental presentation regarding this? Did I miss 7.2? You're right, I did, thank you. I apologize. 7.2. Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Joint Initiative, item number CC 2020-03. I believe that we have a departmental presentation regarding this, or some words to be spoken by Executive Director Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have a presentation on this item today. I believe it to be relatively straightforward. It's a notification to Council of a requirement that the province has set out to have a community safety and well-being plan endorsed by Council before the end of this calendar year. And this short report sets out the work that's being coordinated by Simcoe County, that the CAO will designate someone to work on that with the county, and that currently would be me. And provides an overview of the framework and how that will move forward. We will come back to Council as this proceeds to provide updates through the year so that Council would be aware of what's happening and comfortable with the final plan when it is presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Skinner. Do we have any comment from any member of the public on this item 7.2? If so, seeing none, I will look for a mover and a seconder, the recommendation being that staff report C 2020-03 be received. Council endorsed participation in the county-led collaborative initiative to develop a community safety and well-being plan in a geographical municipal grouping with Wasaka Beach, Clearview, and Springwater, with additional consideration of policing or other priorities shared with the town of the Blue Mountains, and that the CAO or their designate collaborate and work together in developing the CSWB plan through the formation of a geographical municipal coordinating committee. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Vice Chair Comey. Council members, discussion. Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually the beginning of a fairly critical process for us. It's not, it has implications for us in terms of our own community, but also in terms of our police services delivery. Just going back to sort of tie up an end here, in the Simcoe County briefing note, it talks about the planning looking at factors and support a sustainable community where citizens feel safe, have a sense of belonging, have access to services, and where individuals and families are able to meet their needs for education, health, care, food, housing, income, and social and cultural expression. This actually falls right within Sustainable Development Goal number 11, but it's going to help us identify regional issues within the county. And it will be forming a very critical piece of our discussion with the police detachment about service delivery for us. And we will be working as well with the town of Blue Mountains, that is in Grey County, because they form part of our detachment as well. So it's a critical piece of the puzzle moving forward, and it's an exciting opportunity, I think, to identify issues regionally within the county. And we know certainly from the point in time enumeration of homelessness that took place in April of 2018 how impactful that can be. So this gives us an opportunity to take a really broad look at the gaps and needs in our sector in the county, and to focus on that as we move forward.
When you say Sustainable Goal number 11, you're talking about our United Nations connection, yes?
Yes, I am.
Any other discussion from members of the committee? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one comment and one brief question. The comment is that I was very excited to read this because I love anything that has us working collaboratively with our neighbors. My question through you to the CAO is just if you can expand at all on what the CAO's group is. It just sounded cool.
CAO Women?
Thank you. Through Madam Chair. I mean, I think this is an issue of collaborating and working together, and the CEO or designate is an attempt to try and bring the highest level of public service attention to these issues. And designating the executive director, I think, is an attempt to try and pass that mantle on to her for that coordination role. But it's simply an attempt to try and make sure that you have the attention of the senior public servants working in that might impact on their municipalities.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee members? And so we've had a mover and a seconder. I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Moving on to item number 7.3, PRC 2020-03, Public Art Mural Commission, 28 Huron Street. I believe this is from Director Culver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee will recall that we had to decommission heading dockside mural on the side of the Shipyard Medical Center due to some age and deterioration. 19 years was an exceptional life for that piece. And council approved through the budget this year supporting the installation of a new mural to replace that. So this report essentially follows the public art policy to make council aware of where we're at in the process and essentially give you the understanding of the current.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the public regarding this report? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and a seconder on the motion on the table, which is that, or the recommendation rather, that council receive staff report PRC 2020-03, Public Art Mural Commission, 28 Huron Street for information purposes. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Berman, Vice Chair Comey, any discussion from members of the committee? And I'll call the question. Do we receive this? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Moving on to item number 7.4, PRC 2020-04, Collingwood Charters Docking Lease Renewal. And since it says PRC on the front of it, I'm assuming that is Director Culper who's going to speak to this on behalf of staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a good relationship with the proponent who operates the Huronic out of Collingwood Charters in Collingwood Harbour. I will note that the proponent is here today. I'm sure it could be begged to answer questions if there were any. However, simply this is renewing something that would normally fall under the responsibility of the Harbour Master, which is part of my role. However, when it was established, that was not made clear in the report, so we're back here today to ask for renewal and also to confirm the role of the Harbour Master in any future renewals.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the public regarding this report? Seeing none, I will look for a mover and your seconder from the floor. Mayor Saunderson, Councillor Berman, any discussion from members of the committee? Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, I'm very excited to see this move forward. It's been a great development down at the waterfront for us, and they've done a wonderful job down there. Been a great tenant over the last 5 years, and I can tell you, as a user of the waterfront and crafts that are pretty low to the water, when these boats go by, it's nice to see a wave and no wake. And so they're very respectful and cooperative and a valued member of the waterfront. So I'm excited to see this move forward, and it makes a little money for us along the way.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? And so we had a mover and a seconder before I read the darn thing, so I will read it out. The recommendation is that staff report PRC 2020-04 be received and that council approve the renewal of a docking lease for Collingwood Charters for a term of 5 years with an option to renew for an additional 5 years based on mutual agreement, and that council confirm delegated authority for all harbour docking arrangements to the Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture. And I will call the question. Those in favor? And that is unanimous. And we have now, we're moving on to the consent agenda. And so we're looking at items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4. I am not going to read them all out. Do we have a mover and a seconder that the consent items be received? Moved by Councillor Madigan, seconded by Councillor Berman. All those in favor? Oh, do we have discussion first? We do have discussion first. Any discussion on any of these items? All those in favor of receiving them? That is unanimous. Departmental updates and discussion. Item number 9 on our agenda. Are there any departments that report to this committee which need to feel moved to give us an update tonight? Thank you. Moving on to item number 10, public delegations. We have none listed. However, this is your opportunity to speak for 5 minutes to this committee, should you decide to do so. Seeing none, moving on to item number 11, other business. Is there any other business that this committee would like to discuss? Yes, that is definitely. Is there other business first? Councillor Madigan.
This is our CEO's last corporate and community meeting, so thank you, my friend, for sitting with us for the last 2.5 years. And I'm not going to say on behalf because I'll leave that up to the chair, but I just wanted to bring acceptance of that unfortunately he will not be sitting at these meetings, and Executive Director Skinner will be sitting in the big chair moving forward. Congratulations for the 2.5 years sitting through these meetings.
And on behalf of the committee, I would like to offer our thanks for the sage advice that has been provided by our CAO the last 2.5 years, and we look forward to moving forward with Executive Director Skinner as our interim CAO. Thank you. Our other business. So each of us is at this table, including Director Culver and Director Skinner and CAO Min and Clerk Almas are wearing buttons with women's faces on them. And that is in honor of International Women's Day coming up on Sunday. We were given a multiplicity of choices. I took Rosie the Riveter because my niece's name is Rosie. And in World War II, women who worked in Collingwood also worked on some of the ships that were sent off to war. And so we had our own little Rosie the Riveters here in Collingwood. And there was at least 60 women during the Second World War doing that work here in Collingwood. So I'm proud to honor them with this button. Each of the councillors in turn has things to say about the women they are wearing tonight. Shall we start with you, go around the table, Councillor Berman, or should we go to Vice Chair Comey first? Okay, let's just go around the table, Councillor Berman.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if we can get a close-up, but I don't know where to point it. I'm wearing a pin of the Collingwood Ladies Hockey Club, 1898 to 1899. This team traveled to neighboring towns and their games were reported in the newspapers. The first reference to women's hockey appears in 1897, 2 years after the establishment of competitive men's hockey in Collingwood. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we still have competitive men's hockey and are up 2-0 against Stouffville.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Madigan.
I am wearing one half of the duo of Janet and Edith Ross, and I will say half of it, and I will leave the other half to the mayor, I believe. Well, they're both there. They're both there, Brian, but I'm just going to talk about one. I'm going to spread the love. So both of these women worked in the Collingwood Clyde factory manufacturing, which the mayor is 100% correct of where it was. I was incorrect. Manufacturing parts for the mosquito bomber during the Second World War, and I will let our mayor finish up.
On the location, because you told.
I was wrong.
Okay, so the Clyde Aircraft Manufacturing Company was actually located on the same place as the Kaufman Furniture Plant way before it. And so it's a precursor there, but I have the other of the Ross duo, and the woman composed a necessary component of Collingwood's workforce during the war effort. And a little piece of hockey trivia, it is rumored that the first goalie mask was used by women's hockey, so they were way ahead of their time.
They didn't want it. Oh, never mind. Vice Chair Comey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wearing Ms. Evelyn Hiscock, who we mentioned at our presentation was the first elected female municipal councillor in the town.
Thank you.
And the first deputy mayor.
That is correct.
County council in 1953.
Wonderful. And we want to thank particularly Vice Chair Comey, the people on the International Women's Day Committee. Could you bring us up to date on this whole project that's taking place?
Absolutely. So that would be, thank you, Madam Chair. That would be a big thank you to Miss Jennifer Parker, who handmade these buttons along with her daughter. She will have a lot of staff will be wearing the buttons throughout the week. There'll be some available at the library for the flag raising, which is coming up this Thursday in front of the library at 1 p.m. There will be refreshments and cake and song and poetry and buttons and togetherness. So we hope to see everybody there. And I'm sure the committee would very much appreciate me mentioning that there are still tickets available to the panel discussion on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Through Councillor Vernon. We are done with the buttons. We are not going to put the staff on the spot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this other business, would this be the appropriate time to bring up Fisher Field and the new information?
I believe it's other business and the department head is here. So I think that would be fine. Do you have a question for Director Culver?
Well, I don't, it's not so much a question as that based on everything that you supplied us, which was a lot of detail, can I put forward the recommendation that we to continue to pursue the ICIP funding? Is this the appropriate time to do it?
I will direct that to the clerk. Is this the appropriate time to give direction to Director Culver regarding this issue? Would we require a motion?
Since this is something through the chair to the members of the committee, I believe that this would be appropriate. It's within the mandate. It's been an ongoing conversation. Again, any motion or direction that happens here has to be ratified by council. So I believe that it would be appropriate.
Thank you. And so do you have a motion, Councillor Berman, regarding this issue?
Simply that I would, whatever the wording that the clerk will tell me is correct after this, that council support continuing to pursue the ICIP.
And so my question to the clerk in this situation would be, is this what Councillor Berman is providing right now, is notice of motion for the council meeting coming up on the 16th?
This is a standing committee. I think it would be appropriate that it would be a motion here, but considered as a full resolution the next time.
Okay, so you're going to need a seconder for that, and Councillor Madigan seconds that, and terrific. Okay, so we're going to ask Director Culver for a little bit of an update to let the public be aware of what it is that Councillor Berman was just talking about.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So I sent an email to council, bringing them up to speed with some things we found out this past week. Excuse me, going back to November, we submitted an application to the ICIP funding, which at the time we were under the impression or made aware that at the provincial level a decision was made in late January, early February. As of Monday or Tuesday last week, I believe it was, we were told that timeline is shifted and now provincial approval is expected in late spring, early summer. They didn't give us a month or a date, but gave us sort of an indication that it has shifted. This was due to a larger than expected influx of applications and the fact that the applications were being distributed to multiple ministries to deal with different tangents or vectors associated with each application. So I reached out to the Collingwood United Soccer Club and had a meeting with the president and the past president and discussed the timeline. They were supportive of the concept of continuing to pursue the ICIP funding, but it does put a shift in the timeline, obviously. We're still continuing to work with procurement to be ready to go as soon as we receive word one way or the other. We're working with procurement on some creative strategies that might make the timeline quicker if possible. But having said that, that's, I guess, the update for right now.
Thank you. Any questions? We have had a mover and a seconder. Do we have any discussion from members of this committee? Any questions for Director Culver? I do. I just want to be really, really clear on what it is that we're voting on. So we have $811,000 sitting allocated in our budget for this project. And if,
Excuse me, it's actually 911, but yeah.
thank you, $911,000 sitting waiting to build this little building with some loos in it. And if we begin building tomorrow, we lose all hope of receiving money from the provincial and federal governments for having a bigger, beautifuler one. Please pardon my grammar and syntax on that.
So through your chair, so yeah, we're counting on that money as co-funding of the larger envelope agreement. So we'd be responsible for 27% of the total funding envelope, and that's where that money would be allocated if we were successful in receiving the fund. Having said that, we also have a contingency plan that if we're not successful in receiving the fund, that money is we're designing a building to be covered by that amount and to come in and help out with washroom facilities at Fisher Field. So if we get the money, it's our 27% contribution. If not, that will build a facility, a smaller facility at the field. If we were to spend the money tomorrow, then we wouldn't be eligible to use that money for the overall contribution from the province and the feds.
And so if we wait, there's a chance we're going to get this extra money.
Correct.
If we build, there is not much chance that we're going to get this extra money.
Correct.
Okay. And so your recommendation would be that we wait, or that, I guess the vote is that we wait and build once we know one way or the other. So we might still get a smaller one, but we might get a great one, or a bigger one. Okay, thank you. So I will, seeing no other questions, call the question on, do we have the wording, Clerk Almus, on that? Did you write something down? Because I didn't.
Certainly, it's the motion.
Difficulties?
There you go.
There we go. Through the chair to members of the committee, the motion as drafted is that the committee, based on the new information provided, authorize continue to pursue the ICIP funding for the Fisher Field grant application, which will shift the time frame.
All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And I think we have one other piece of business on today's agenda, and that is I am looking for an adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? There we go, Councillor Madigan. This meeting is adjourned.